This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Today's guest is really a repeat for me, but not for you, as we had to scrap our first amazing interview due to technical difficulties. And so we've had a rehearsal, and you out there, the listeners, get an opportunity to meet my wonderful guest along with me this morning. Dylan Newcomb is an excellent example of what Welcome to Humanity is all about. And I think you'll see that as the conversation unfolds, that really an opportunity to be spectacular and extraordinary and just follow what's important. And we're also going to learn things about him that neither he or I know we're going to explore this morning. So welcome to Humanity, Dylan. It's just a pleasure and honor to have you again.
Thank you so much, Fred. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here again.
Oh, thank you.
Each and every one of us is really dealing with something, right? No matter whether we're tackling some of the big problems in the world or maybe even the tiny ones, we all face challenges. Now, I've been a psychiatrist for many years, and I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can really count, from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. So naturally, over time, I've developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. Now, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of those methodologies, and I'm going public, revealing the process and associated mindset that contributed to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out in my new book called Creative Aid, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in audiobook format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative Aid today. I really look forward to hearing about your Creative Aid breakthrough. Now, let's get back to this amazing conversation.
Welcome to Humanity. So, Dylan, we had a great conversation, and there's been some time, I don't know, 3 weeks since we spoke, and then life has gone on, and then we've had what we've had, and every single minute we've had has been accumulating since the last time we spoke, and this and that happened, and this and that didn't happen, and this and that was supposed to happen but didn't happen. And that stuff wasn't supposed to happen, but did happen.
Are you talking about life in general, or are you talking about like our technical snafus?
No. Life in general.
Life in general. Okay. You're summarizing life. I get it.
Exactly. Yes. And so we both had an opportunity to live our lives in maybe the illusion or the reality of a separateness from each other. And, I've gone that route, you've gone that route, and we find ourselves back again in this conversational domain to begin a new conversation. So I think the conversation I probably had with you last time may have started with a similar question. And that is, Dylan Newcomb, who are you? Who are you?
Who am I? And when you've been doing meditation, for 40 years, it gets more complicated, doesn't it? 40 years. No, not 40 years. What am I? I'm 49. I started when I was 12. I don't want to do the math. Who am I? Well, if I'm just going to be really honest.
Yeah, sure.
I experience self as the space through which energy and information flows in a very conditioned manner. Energy and information goes through the interpretation apparatus, through the colliding with my conditioning apparatus, and then comes out the other end, and I have a modicum of control in that.
That's
which
awesome.
I try to make best use of, and then you just sort of flow with it as best you can and enjoy the ride. However, my sense of, like, when you say, who are you, then I think and I don't really think of I and self as being the same thing anymore.
Okay.
There is I, which is sort of more and more just an experience of consciousness is happening. And then there's the self-other, the various myriad complex self-other interactions. And so more and more the sense of I is the space and the kind of sense of experience of that self-othering, if you will.
Yes.
So I can kind of come into here and sort of like nest for a little while, but then it flies away again, and it's just sort of all of it. that was the super metaphysical take on the who are you, but I
love it. So let's look at, there's a couple different places to launch from, I think here, this idea that it's a conditioned life, and then the idea that there is a modicum of control that you have. There is something you can say, even if it is just a tiny piece, something you can say. And I suspect that you could pass this information on in such a way to our listeners. It's not like Dylan's got super radical special skills to have a modicum of control. There's something us humans have that has a modicum of control in how our life is going, so that it isn't simply let information out, mangle, information in, mangle, information out. There's an opportunity to do something.
Yeah.
Little modicum you spoke of. What is that?
And well, the first thing is, like, we seem to have some degree of choice or the possibility of control over what we pay attention to, right? Where I place my attention. That is for me the highest leverage point of control. Is I'll pick my morning, right? So classic morning, here I am, I work from home here in my office, and I spend for an embodiment expert and teacher, I spend a lot of time behind the computer, even more now with COVID. But I had already been working online for about 8 years, so it wasn't a huge shift for me, but yeah, I digress. So here I am in front of my computer, and what am I going to focus on? I have a few hours before the podcast with Fred, right? Where am I going to put my attention? So for me, I started in with, the to-do list and the calendaring, but then I realized that my energy wasn't quite in the optimal place for that to happen most effectively. So I set a timer for 5 minutes, and I laid over there on my mat, and I rolled around, and then I jumped up and down, and I sort of did a little moving meditation, and then the alarm went off and I came back. So I had that choice, right? I could choose not to take those 5 minutes, but I chose to take those 5 minutes to listen to my body, to what was going on, to respond to it, and change the flow of energy and information in my system, and then bring that back to bear to my calendaring and to doing. So that's just one concrete example of those options we have. Yeah.
So what we pay attention to, it seems that without very much distance between, what we pay attention to equates to something called maybe a choice. And what a choice is something like a freedom. And what the freedom is something like emanating from this I, or the self of mine, the opportunity to micro correct or direct myself in an area of something that either interests me, or I can literally choose to affect the input in for me, for my life. Like, I can choose to modulate what it is I pay attention to, at least a little bit. A little bit. Of course, if there's a big boom out right now, I'll be paying attention to that.
Right.
There's some things that just intrude into my attention space. But there's other things, I hear you, for which I can choose, I want to move my Kleenex box off my table now. So I'm going to do that. And that feels like something that I had an input into about how my life goes. That there's an I here that could modulate or...
Yeah. So I see a little messiness on my desk right here. I could choose to prioritize that or not, right? I could choose to ignore it and say, yeah, whatever. And that might be fine. Or I could choose to go, you know what? No, I'm going to take action on that. So how much are we conscious of certain inputs? Like, that is actually bothering me. And then how much do we value that? Like, I felt, my energy isn't quite right. I could have chosen to go, bummer. Or, maybe I'll get a coffee later or something. Right. So what are we aware of, first of all? Like, I've dedicated a lot of my life to being aware of my body, so it's fairly easy for me. So a lot of people have to start making more of a concerted effort to, wait a minute, let me listen. How do I feel? And then the knowledge, growing the knowledge and the skill of what are your options of what you could then do with that, whether it's a simple breathing technique or some movement, anything helps.
So
Almost anything.
I think you do have an answer for this, but who is this thing that's making these choices, decisions, and micro direction? What is this? Where does that thing live? And why is that not entirely run by the input of random or external conditions that are driving it? What frees it from this lattice that allows the it that we're calling I or me to make some decisions on how my life is going? Where does that thing reside?
Yeah, this is a hotly debated topic, and there's lots of different views on it. There's people that will argue, fairly learned scientists that study this, that control is an illusion, and they can make some very convincing arguments for why control is even illusion. That said, maybe I'll touch on some of that more concretely in a moment. But that said, even if free will and control is an illusion, it's a very practical illusion if we take advantage of it. Just like we could say, yeah, life is a simulacra, or life is a. Some people, there's quite a few scientists that believe that life is a simulation, and there's multiple simulations, and okay, but we're still here in it, so we can play the rules well. I guess this is a preface to say that I don't, the more this system, my body-mind awareness system evolves, the less vigorously I hold a notion of individual free will or control or purpose. And I used to be really about life purpose. My coaching used to be embody your purpose. I'm no longer interested in purpose.
Interesting.
And yet I always am working for myself and with my students and clients to help them be able to participate more and more skillfully with that which is apparently present and that which is seemingly wanting to happen. But without the notion of, I know it, I'm going to control it, that sort of more top-down, identify, control, dominate. Because at the end of the day, we have access to the inputs we have. We make sense of it the way we make sense of it, and we respond to the best of our ability. But all of that is within such humble, measly proportions of actual knowing, right? And that's not to denigrate it, but just to be cognizant and humble to, like, we make the best with what we do, the best we can with what we have. And that's awesome. But let's not fool ourselves that we know really, and that we can control really. Anyway, back to this control thing. One thing I like to say, this may be just helpful to put on the table here, is I define attention as shaped awareness.
Okay.
And here's how I find that useful. I like to separate out body, mind, and awareness as three distinct things. Some people, of course, argue, and this is the traditional scientific view, that consciousness and its sort of byproduct, awareness, is a function of mind. Yeah, that mind sort of gives rise at a certain point. If you got enough neurons firing, voila, it starts to give off consciousness and thus awareness. And oh yeah, there's sort of a body dangling off that mind that provides it some fuel and some ability to take action. Of course, there are other people that say, no, everything is consciousness, and mind and body emerge from that virile soup. I am more of that consciousness first tradition and view. I'm in the minority with that, with people that are specialized in an embodied cognitive neuroscience. The embodied cognitive neuroscience field is predominantly materialistic in that sense. They're very grounded in the body-mind interaction, and that gives rise to consciousness. Now, why is this relevant to what I'm talking about? Awareness consciousness is, in my book, consciousness is mind and body being a particular contained arising within that sea, take awareness and sort of fractalize it. They sort of take it and sort of like a little bubble of air underwater. They hold it captive, hopefully for good purposes, not always. And so the mind-body mechanism is capable of taking consciousness and sort of packaging it, shaping it. Right now, I'm constraining the sea of consciousness, and I'm highly concentrating it right here into this discussion with you.
Okay.
Right.
So it's almost like it's not really, as I hear it, there's the mind, body, and then conscious awareness. There's the mind and body that seem to be a little bit more interrelated. And then awareness that sits above an umbrella, an overarching experience that the mind and body then pick from and fractalize and create something that's metabolizable, something like this?
You know, like when you buy that pancake mix that you don't have to mix multiple ingredients. It's just add water.
Yeah.
It's like you got mind, body, and those are the raw ingredients. And then it's like just add consciousness.
I see.
It's often said that, you know, the body without the spirit is a corpse. Yeah. And the spirit without the body is a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when awareness is consciously brought in to a certain sphere of my mind, body, environment interactions, when awareness is consciously brought into that, what it does is it opens this gap where I can study the current cause-effect loops of my conditioning. And it affords me this magical opportunity to make choices, to go, but do I want it to happen that way? Like right now, I listen to my body and I feel a little bit of compression in my neck. It was already there. That was already the way my mind body was maintaining that. But now that I put awareness there, I have a choice. Oh, and now it's going to do that. And because of the conditioning, it might go back to it. But if I do that enough times, it'll recondition itself, right? And then I'll start to do this. But if I hadn't have put awareness to there, the conditioning just would have played out ad infinitum, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, one of the places, this idea of having a say in the matter of my life in any way is exciting. There's like, there's a part of me that if given a choice to just be, you know, a leaf in the river at the effect of the world around me versus even having a modicum or a small percentage or a capacity or access to anything to say about how my life is going, it's very clear that I would choose the second choice rather than just be a leaf in the river of my life, you know, rather than just be at the effect of everything happening around me.
Right.
There's
right,
some
right.
You know, the desperate clinging to this notion. Oh, really? I have something to say about how my life goes. Like if I massage and learn about my consciousness, maybe I can actually make a difference in the quality of who I am and who I am for others and the impact I'm making and the legacy I'm leaving. And, you know, in fact, how life unfolds in general or total for everyone. Like maybe I really have a say in the matter. And that's really exciting. And it's sort of like, well, it gets smushed sometimes. Like I'm like, oh, I really have something to say about how this world is going. When my consciousness expands to the point that I can get that I have something to say about how my life is unfolding, then I don't even know the extent for which I have something to say about it. You know, it's like, oh, well, maybe I could, by visualizing or by creating a reality that otherwise wouldn't have existed if I didn't start creating it, I can alter the way my life goes. All right, that's very exciting. And then I don't know the limits to that on the high end. And I don't even know if I'm just making it up and I'm just a leaf in a river. It's sort of like halfway in between. How powerful am I and how entirely powerless am I? Is there truly a space in between there for which I have some access to making a difference in how my life unfolds?
Yeah. Back to this notion of bringing awareness to a process and what that opportunities that affords. There is the possibility / temptation to, when I bring awareness to something, let's say I have a habit, let's just say, I'm not saying, but let's just say that hypothetically someone has a habit of suddenly opening a YouTube tab in the middle of working on something and then just randomly watching a YouTube video. I'm not saying I ever do that, but and I could say, okay, I don't want to do that anymore. Like I am wasting too much time watching YouTube videos when I should be working. What does awareness bring to that, and how much control do I have over that? Just like whether it's a suddenly start up a YouTube thing, or it's a habit of picking earwax out of your ear, whatever those sort of habits, those habits where you just find yourself doing it again and you're like, what? Oh shit, there I am again.
Yeah.
Whether it's that sort of like automatic habit, or whether it's a more like, hey, wait a minute, I want to determine the course of my life and go there. That's a larger thing, but it'll apply to both. By starting with awareness, I start with where I'm at. It's very easy for the mind to project. It's relatively easier to project a sense of a possible goal. And that can be problematic, and I don't know, and but that's a whole different conversation. We can project a desired reality, but then how to get there, right? Well, awareness starts with where you're at and deepens your understanding of where you're at. And if we're not realistic about to the degree that we're not realistic about where we're really at, then it becomes that much harder to get. It's like you have a map and you say, I want to go to LL Bean, and okay, the map will show you that, but it doesn't show where you are. And if you don't know the city you're in, you're like, if I can notice the quality and the energy and the flow of that urge in me that precedes or motivates that compulsive opening up of the YouTube tab, then at that moment, the deeper and more full I can be aware of it, the more I start to open that window where I can go, oh, I feel that urge, but maybe I don't have to do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can just feel it. Maybe I can breathe, or maybe I can go, oh, maybe this is a sign that I need to take a break, or some other more constructive choice.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I wanted to just note when I was talking about people that are researching the illusion of control. I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but there's been a whole body. I wish I could remember. I think it's Benjamin Libet, Libet, and some others did experiments on this, where when a thought arises in somebody's mind, I want to do this, or I think I should do that, they are able to track the action potentials in their body that go to movement, and that those action potentials to move occur a half to a second and a half earlier than the conscious thought arises to take action. You're nodding your head. You've heard this.
Real aware of this one. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yeah.
A shocking notion, this temporality of the cart before the horse, is a really, it sort of deconstructs everything I'd like to think about the cascade of my thought leading to an action. All of a sudden, it's like my action actually led to the thought to do it. It's confusing at that level.
Yeah, it's confusing and humbling, and it's one of those like little factoids that we want to sweep away under the carpet. And together with that is also the notion that people that are researching the mind-body interaction have generally come to it, that is a huge amount of our thinking is rationalizing our embodied impulses.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that goes very much together with what we were just talking about, right? Of the action potential arising beforehand. So we, people like Dan Irely, who's been researching irrationality in decision making, has done a lot of research and also compiled a lot of the research on this over the years, where we generally have a gut feeling about something, whatever that means, right? We have an impulse, we have a preference, we have an affect about something. And then so much of our rational decision-making process is trying to justify / rationalize that preference to ourselves and others. Nowhere is this more on display than in American politics, perhaps right now.
Right.
Because I want it to be that way. So here's my argument.
Right. Yeah. That's exactly right. Sort of like reverse, it seems reverse from what we would like to say is so. We seek out evidence for that which we have somehow impulsively taken on to be the way that we see the world. Like we see the world somehow, and then we seek out evidence to support that that's obviously the right way to see the world. And then we just find that evidence because there's no paucity of evidence out there to support any stand, actually. And I can pick and choose the evidence and reject the evidence that doesn't support it, instantly reject evidence that doesn't support my notion.
And if we take that notion of we already, have certain implicit biases and values, and we see the world in a certain way, and if we sink that down a level deeper into the body more directly, we could underpin that. I would underpin that with, we have, and it's going to sound kind of technical, but we have certain, no, I can say it simply. We have certain ways that we feel more comfortable being, right? I feel more comfortable in this type of situation. Or, someone might just even unconsciously feel uncomfortable around Black people, or feel uncomfortable around two men kissing, or feel, just to pick some sort of socio-political hot buttons. Or I might just feel more comfortable with white dinner plates, when I'm making a decision with my wife at the store about which dinner plates to buy. I just might simply like the white, but then I come out with this whole lengthy explanation of why white is easier to clean, and we'll see the turpin, blah, 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 blah. And I'm laying it on her, my old logic. I just like white.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. And I think let's hover over the top of this one, because there's something about the illusion of control, but there's also something about the cascade of which comes first, is there a cause and effect? Is there, when I choose to do something and then get it done, which thing happened first? If it's actually possible that I get something done and then I choose to do it, and that some temporality is reversed that way, that I have an experience and then it happens to me.
Yeah, let me bring this in the context of my work more explicitly.
Sure.
So, because we've already had the conversation about like, what do I do in the world? So we're almost, we could argue that we're sort of holding that as context that you and I hold, but our listeners don't hold. So I, just as a little bit of context for our listeners, I started as a musician, as a dancer, had a career, successful, exciting career as a creative artist till about 28 years old. Then I started but I was a meditator, so I was always into Buddhist meditation and consciousness. And so for me, the question, I'm going to loop this back in about 2 minutes to control.
Sure.
The question was, okay, I had this kind of schism in my life between when I was making music, when I was in the studio dancing, I had access to flow states, to beautiful aesthetic experience through ways of interacting with people that just felt good, true, and beautiful. But I was not able to, they weren't translating into my relationship skills. They weren't translating into my relationship with money. They weren't translating into helping me with arrogance or, whatever personality issues I was dealing with. In a way, it was like I could sort of hide from my life because I had that art thing and it was going so well. I could sort of hide in that and go, well, I'm a good artist. Screw you, people like my art. And at a certain point, I was like, I want to figure out how to port that over, to take some of that flow, that goodness, that awareness and skill that I can utilize so well here. I know how to make music. I know how to dance. I know how to communicate on a stage. How can I port that over? And so I started a laboratory for sound and movement research in the Netherlands. I got a bunch of funding from the Dutch government, and I spent 2 years researching how sound and movement affects thought, emotion, and behavior as a way of starting to see how could we cultivate states and do it in a way that we could clarify what kind of a state that was, and then play around with how can we use this as a kind of support, resource, fuel to support these other aspects of my life. And that quickly became, on one hand, over time, it was a kind of a two-part study. On one hand, there's understanding states, right? Giving more and more definition, like different types of calm states, different energized states, different relational states versus more individual states. When I say state, a state, what I mean by that is in its broadest sense, right? Just of like the cocktail of the physiological, sympathetic, parasympathetic balance, my emotional tone or mood at that moment, the thought patterns that are going on, all of that synergistically, right, puts us in a state that gives us certain behavioral tendencies, certain experiential qualities. So learning how to, or developing a rigorous, precise framework to be able to identify different types of states in a way that's functional. That's what I've spent really the last 15 years doing. On the other side is a study of life situations and going, what types of states will help different situations? You know, like if I'm with a client and I want to empathize with them, what state will most serve that? If I'm on a stage presenting my work, what kind of state will most support that?
Okay.
If I'm doing my taxes, blah, 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 blah. So that more and more we can become aware. What I've been developing with what we call UZAZU Embodied Intelligence is the name of the work that I developed and am teaching. And it's an ongoing evolution of this work, is of understanding, again, to summarize, what states am I in right now? What do I want to be engaging in? And how well matched is my current state to the situation? And then how can I align and then I have a choice. I can go, oh, if that's a significant mismatch, to what degree do I want to go, you know, I want to honor this state right now, so I'm going to stop doing this because it's really not a match, right? Mm-hmm. Or I just need to take a break from trying to write all these emails and honor where I'm at. And or can I shift my state right now? Can I drop in? Can I power up? Can I expand out or contract in? What will serve me right now? Mm-hmm. So this connects back to that free will and control question. And so with that in mind, now I'll answer that kind of question you put up in the space more pointedly, which is, if I remember it, feel free to adapt it, is what kind of control do we really have? That was part of your question, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. Like, yeah. Where does it really come from? And are we just seeking support for the notion that we have control? Or really, where is there an exercise or a practice that can pay attention to and perhaps expand or give me greater access to the kind of control that I have, the modicum of control I have for how my life is going in any given state in any given moment? Right,
right. So from the context that I was just talking about, my answer would be, we do have control, and we can practice gaining more and more control to put our awareness on our state and become aware of where we're really at. That's the first most important control, to exercise awareness at will in a way that generates useful insight. Just, you know, more detailed and usable than just, I don't feel good or I feel okay. Oh, I feel da 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 da. And then being able to make an informed decision of what I was just saying, of, do I want to shift this state? And then there's some skill, but we've learned if you know the basics of what is involved in a state, it's not that much training to shift it. It's actually not that hard. You just need to know how. And we could unpack that a little bit if we decide to go there in this conversation. To shift my state, now that doesn't then give me control over the outcome of what happens in the world, but it greatly increases my leverage of how likely I am to be engaging in whatever I'm doing productively.
Mm-hmm. Is it reliable, expandable? Does it take attention? Does it take a practice? Do I have to do this every day? Do I have to do this every minute? Do I have to, or is it just something that only gurus can do? Is it only something that you have to be like really, really like, mindful, or can Joe Human just get this done?
Right. Here's the thing. The answer is, broadly speaking, it's not nearly as difficult as once thought. But there are complications, and it does depend. And a lot of that depends on somebody's trauma history. but we can circle back on that in a moment. So like what I'm going to say is with the caveat of trauma can disrupt this and then needs to be cleared so that the body is less reactive and can get on with the business of shifting state. Trauma teaches your system in a way, among other things that it does, that certain things are not safe to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing that disrupts our ability to shift our state more than the unconscious body-mind assumption that it's not safe to feel certain things. Mm-hmm. Because if you can't feel it, you can't move through it because you just can't even touch it. It's like that mess in your office that you don't want to look at. So you just sort of put a cloth over it instead of going through it. So if you want to authentically shift your state, you need to be able to feel it and move through it. That's why I said like the control is you can put your attention on it to a degree, depending on your capacity to really let yourself feel it. And then it's quite simple to then shift it again, relative to the amount of access that you've cultivated and flow that you've cultivated. On average, I would say that like with UZAZU, when we teach people UZAZU, they can learn it in a day. They can practice it, I would say 2 to 3 times a week for 15 to 30 minutes. And within a month, basically have it down, like basically be able to do it, which is very, very different, very, very different than the meditation practices that I grew up with.
Right. So this thing, it's a month, like, wow, that doesn't seem like very long. And it gives me a massive access to what? So if we could tell me, okay, so in a month, let's say I do this 3 times a week, a half an hour a day, 3 times a week, and I'm in and I'm playing, I have the access in a day, I at least learn the basics. And then in a month, I'm rolling. What is it that I'm rolling with that I didn't have a month ago?
Yeah, great. We call it UZAZU Embodied Intelligence. And this is, there are other techniques that do it. I'm just, of course, talking from the technique that I teach. Different, that do it in certain aspects. Anyway, what we find is that the more you practice shifting states into a full spectrum of states. So what does that mean? The more that I practice drawing my attention away from the world and really putting it on my own embodied experience, right? And just practice that. Then so the more well-worn that pathway is of my awareness flowing into and through my mind body. And the more I then practice letting that flow out and really rest on the other person, right? So I can really be present to you. The more I consciously practice that, really listening to any tension or anxiety that comes up in my body, pausing and breathing with that, so it becomes a more and more authentically effortless experience. The more responsive, skillfully responsive, your body-mind awareness will be moment to moment. This is one piece of it that I'm describing.
Yeah.
So that when it's time for me to listen to you, I just do that. I don't have to be like, it feels unconsciously safe and easy. My body mind knows how to do that. When it's time when you ask me how I feel, it's easy for me to check in and notice that because I've practiced doing that.
Yes. So there's an alignment or maybe an efficiency or less resistance or less noise. There's like a capacity to be consistent with, my experience, to somehow be resonating maybe.
Yeah. One thing I like to say is reconditioning ourselves to become more fully available to the invitation of the moment.
Oh, that's pretty great. That's kind of what I was saying. That's pretty great. That's pretty beautiful.
When you do it on an embodied level, it's not like, oh shit, I got to remember to X, Y, Z. Yeah. Your body takes that over and just goes there. When it's time for me to create now, and I go, okay, create, I've retrained my body to power up and come into that space that most supports me to be in inspiration mode, But if I haven't reawoken that pathway, maybe that pathway, for example, got compromised when I was 4 years old and I came down into the kitchen. I said, look at what I created, Dad. And he yelled at me or hit me or just ignored me. Right now, my body mind, even though I'm now 40 years old or whatever, and I think creativity is great, my body still thinks it's not safe.
Right.
if I can retrain my body that it is safe and good for me to access all of the core flows that I need, then my embodied intelligence is just going to use those pathways because they're most efficient and effective.
Interesting. So it's almost like it's a natural state of affairs once you access the cobwebs and move them off, and once you maybe have the courage or the vulnerability to take on the traumas, the affecting, disruptive traumas that we all experience on a day-to-day basis that have really inflicted some massive damage in our capacity to be effective and efficient in how we proceed in the world. Like really, once we take these on, then the notion that creativity as a natural way of being, the notion of being self-expressive as just a core existent feature of life becomes more and more readily available.
Right. And not exactly, and not just that, but to be empathic when called for, to be playful, to be co-creative. Like our body thrives on those, like vitamins and minerals. Our system wants that. And by clearing out and reactivating those pathways, then the natural processes of growth and human development can more fully kick in again, right? So then first is sort of restoring and reactivating, but then growth just happens more organically and synergistically again.
Yeah, sort of like a tilled soil, sort of like something, planting.
Right. Right. You got to jumpstart the garden, and then it kind of takes on a life of its own. Yeah,
that's really cool.
Like for me at this point, also because I trust in the fertility of my system, so to speak. I've never called it that, but I don't worry about where my life is going because I really don't. Like what's wanting to happen will happen, and if all the core ingredients are good, like a really good entrepreneur will bring together a really great team and trust them. Right. If he micromanages them, he's going to squelch all their talents and piss them all off.
Yeah.
It's like if you reactivate and cultivate all of your core states, then just show up and trust your intuition and your instincts in the moment and the opportunities.
One of the things we've been doing, my wife has studied with you, of course, you know that. And one of the things we've been doing in the last, few weeks, maybe months, maybe longer than that, is really, finding ourselves sort of walking the walk, talking the talk, like taking on those habits that aren't working, and then they still show up again. And, going to certain places in the environment, or listening to that kind of music, or bathing, or hugging, or crying, or all those things that, self-expression, authenticity, really taking those on. And one of the things I want to point to is that the universe seems to respond, and sometimes several times in a day, with magic that far exceeds anything that randomness could explain. Like the moon is in the perfect space, or the exact right person says the exact right thing, or the phone call comes that says something that I could not have imagined, that actually gives me the leaps and bounds forward that I had no idea I was coming, or, there's some sort of confirmation in the ethos that I'm living in line with who it is I'm supposed to be, or that I've paid proper attention to get a little taste, a little feedback, a little dividend for living in a way that is consistent with sort of the music of the creative world. Does that make sense? I get this feedback a few times a day, and it's like, holy cow, that's proof for the existence of the eternal. Thank you. I needed that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think I can resonate with that. Like I can make the effort to resonate with that, but I don't work that way at all internally for myself. Like I don't remember looking at the world. Do I? I don't know. Certainly in the last years, I haven't had that experience of like looking for proof or confirmation. What I do very much notice, which I think has an overlap with what you're saying, is that depending on what is most alive and sort of inherently valuable for me, like what I'm most metabolizing and savoring, that synchronicities appear within that bandwidth.
Yeah.
Like I've come to suspect that there's probably 1,000 times more synchronicities, so to speak, or potential resonances available to me at any moment, but it's kind of like the bandwidth within which I'm noticing them at that moment. Sort of like, like we see this much of the spectrum of light, right? We can see this much and we can go, oh my gosh, it's a computer, it's a bottle of water, but like a bug is seeing, another part of the spectrum as well. So I feel like some of the synchronicity, the way that we perceive synchronicities is just like that which we're able to see. And there's infinitely more of them that we're just not tuning into.
Yeah.
I just last thought on that, Fred. I have this thing that's growing for me more and more. I guess it comes from this shift in the last 4 years for me of experiencing the I as self-othering, as the process of self-othering. Like it used to be I here, you there. Now it's I sort of here everywhere. And it's almost like one big self-othering toroidal flow that I just get to be. I had this image when it first started arising of like, I was talking to people and I would, so we have a 9-year-old daughter, and, one of the things that we've loved to do over the years is have a family sandwich. We call it a love sandwich, so we just put her in between us and we hug, it's just, we still do that sometimes. She's a little bit less into it now than she was, but she still lets us do it sometimes. And I kind of felt like, wow, I'm that child. Like when I'm with you, for example, I can experience myself as kind of the love child of this self-othering.
Interesting.
And it's just such a beautiful feeling. And then I realized that you can have that experience with space and the objects in it too.
Yeah.
Like if you just let yourself be the space that connects you with all the other objects. Oh, synchronicity. When I'm in that space, it's almost like everything my eyes touch, all objects of awareness feel synchronous.
Yeah.
Anyway, just thought it came up for me, so I shared it.
No, I think I don't know. For me, as you speak to that, there's something that resonates with that periodic confirmation from the cosmos I was speaking of earlier. It's like, yeah, when I'm locked in, this is what we're talking about. So when I'm really locked in, when I'm really locked into my experience, when I'm really, really flowing, when I'm in tune, when I'm resonating with the world around me, when I'm creating the world I want to live in, when it's happening at a space where beauty is being experienced, either at my authorship or at my receipt, when all of that is happening, it's like, yeah, this is the essence of life. This is why I'm here. This rocks. I love it. There's like a life, a beauty, a love, a happiness, a truth, an eternity that all meet at that intersection, and it's exquisite. And it, unfortunately, at least for me, and maybe not so unfortunate, it's a little bit fleeting. It's not every moment, which what keeps it exquisite is that it's not permanent, it comes back. It's like, oh, that's exquisite, and then there is some level of permanence in the notion that I know it's there. Having experienced it, I know that I can get there again, or the likelihood of even buzzing by it in this conversation is extraordinary, right? Even speaking to it is extraordinary.
Yeah, we're tasting it right now.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really great.
Looping back to that little bit of history that I shared of how my first half of my adulthood was primarily aesthetic, right? It was the experience of moving, the experience of watching other people move, the experience of making music, hearing music. Those are nonverbal aesthetic experiences. So sort of beauty-based living, if you talk about the big three of it, beauty, goodness, and truth, right? That was really beauty, or the aesthetic experience. Fast forward 18 years later, along this quest of like, how can I bring that more into my life? as you were just talking about your experience of that, Fred, there's something very fundamentally aesthetic about it, right? It's very qualitative. And whether we use the word embodied explicitly or not, an aesthetic experience is per definition an embodied experience. It's a felt, those are felt qualities. If I was to summarize from that perspective of what I started out with, the sort of problem I was trying to solve or itch I needed to scratch, I would reframe it now as to let my life be more and more aspects of my life, more and more moments and interactions within my life be informed and enriched and guided by the aesthetic experience of it. Mm-hmm. That aesthetics are not just a diversion, not just a stress reliever or an entertainment source, but we can learn to harness, to ground into that and weave it fundamentally as an input and an output of every moment and every process that we're in, rather than what has happened of this sort of top down of, wait a minute, what do I want to get out of this? What's the meaning of that? How can I manage to make it happen? Like, it's very easy for aesthetics to then just sort of wither over here as entertainment. And then there's work, and then there's, life.
Yeah. We could go on for a long time here. I'm wondering if really you might have, at least for our listeners, the UZAZU, in a month, I have access to a greater awareness of what you're speaking to here. In a month of UZAZU, the embodiment of my life experiences, of the sounds, of my listening, of my, how I see the world. I get an access to bringing forth more fullness of the truth and the beauty and the goodness of life around, even with just a month of this practice. Is that fair to say?
I don't want to make overblown promises, but that tends to be people's experience. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Dylan, how can people get a hold of you? And not only for UZAZU, I mean, after all, they might want to get a hold of you just because they like you, and now they like you're just fun to be with, and you got all sorts of things to say, or all sorts of things to learn from, or maybe things that you're worth following or worth learning with you, or collaborating with. How would someone get a hold of Dylan Newcomb?
Well, you can just email me. My name is. My email is Dylan, DYLAN .Newcomb, NEWCOMB @UZAZU.org, UZAZU.org. That's the website. There's a lot there. There's several free webinars, UZAZU.org. There's a free assessment, which we've worked really hard on. It's really good. And it gives you real clarity about what states that you're currently occupying and what the advantages of those are. And uniquely, what imbalance states, how often you're inhabiting which imbalance states and what the sort of challenges of those are. Because as I said before, once you know what states you tend to occupy, now you can have a more embodied and aesthetically grounded, if you will, inquiry into why am I not, living the life that I want to live, so to speak.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Is there anything else you want to say or add as we taper this down, as we go to the edge, as we complete this aspect of our conversation, which I'm sure will continue over the months and years ahead? Is there anything else you want to say to our viewers, or to me, or to yourself, or to your viewers before we close today?
At the very beginning of this podcast, you framed me as an example of someone living a certain kind of life. Can you
Oh, I think it's something about living a spectacular, extraordinary life just by being you, and just by bringing in a contribution, just by grabbing life as it's happening. I'm not sure I said it just like this, but just that you are the embodiment of someone who's living a life aligned and who's making a difference and contributing to others as a way of being.
I think because that's also very much related to the sort of essence of your podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
It is, of course. What could you mean?
Mm-hmm. So if I just hold that notion, maybe I'll leave people with a parting thought in that sphere. I think that a lot of tension comes from from the intent that we have on living a great life or an awesome life or a better life. And and we can get fixated very quickly on the what of our life, like the what we want our life to look like, or what we want our life to feel like, or what we want to have in it. And my experience, like where this work has brought me, is that if we can attend to the how, to the moment to moment how of it, like I want to be in more flow. I want to be able to become masterful at letting go of stuff, of tension. I want to become masterful at changing my state. That the what can be afforded much more freedom to sort of unfold organically.
Right. So it becomes a natural byproduct of the be, that's
exactly.
Yeah, no attachments, no aversions. There's a whole idea of like, cleaning up the machine and then letting it run its course pretty much, but yeah.
Last tiny anecdote. I had a period about 8 years ago. No, I don't know, 7 years ago, whatever, where for various reasons, we scaled down the business of UZAZU. It was in a period where it wasn't making much money. We just had our daughter. We really had to do this. And we ended up doing Airbnb to fill in the financial gaps. Mm-hmm. And we live in Maine, vacation land. We were booked solid for the summer. And my job was cleaning the guest bathroom. And Kyung Sung, my wife's job, was making the beds. And our daughter's job was sort of helping out a little bit. So I was scrubbing other people's shit out of the toilet several times a week. Someone who has won multiple awards on the stage, who has been touted as da-da-da-da-da. My life was, I went to Juilliard. I was going to be famous. Here I am fucking scrubbing shit out of toilets multiple days a week. I had a little bit of resistance. I had some moments where I was like, where has my life come to? Not too much, but a little bit. And I'd never forget this moment where I'm there, I'm scrubbing the toilet. And I thought, what the heck am I doing resisting this? Like, why not say yes to this?
Mm-hmm.
And I asked myself that earnestly, and I couldn't think of a reason not to say yes to it.
Mm-hmm.
And in like 4 seconds, I could feel my whole energy system go from this, for those of you listening, this is me reticently scrubbing shit out of a toilet, to this.
Isn't that great?
And I was like, say yes. Say yes,
Yeah.
because every step is a step between the last step and the next step. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it was a pivot point in my life.
That's just great. Very, very, very insightful and really inspiring. Thank you, Dylan. Dylan, thank you for being a guest on Welcome to Humanity. It has, as I hope for, it has been inspiring, and certainly the contribution you are to me and to all others far exceeds anything you really know yourself to be. And I think that's part of, being on the blade of grass in the forest, and it just can't see. A pleasure to be here. A pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor, and I look forward to future conversations and, dipping into UZAZU a little more than I have as well. So thank you for being you. Thank you for your lovely face. Thank you for all of your contribution to me, to us, to humanity. Welcome to Humanity, Dylan. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Fred. A delight to talk with you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciated meeting with Dylan today and learning about a man who has just been totally committed to finding a way to make a difference in people's lives, using all of his artistic and creative capacities, not only to use something that's functionally brilliant, but to have created it from the ground up, and now to have it where people are learning from him and acquiring this knowledge and then providing it to great use for the world around us. Just beautiful. And maybe when you were listening today, you thought of a person, or maybe even 2 or 3, who need to hear this particular episode. Go ahead, reach out to them right now and invite them to listen and to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And while you're at it, I'd like to ask a favor of you that would have a really big impact in terms of making a difference. Could you just take a moment and hit the subscribe button on your podcast player, and that way you'll get the latest episodes as they become available. Subscribes and reviews are the 2 major ways that we can reach more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast, so they really do make a difference. If the conversations we're having here contribute to your life, and they might, well then, Pay it forward by subscribing and leaving a wonderful review. I would be truly grateful for your support. Also, to catch up on past episodes, head on over to welcometohumanity.net/podcast. And until next time, well, this is Dr. Fred, and this has been another great edition of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. Thank you much for being here. Thank you for listening. Have a beautiful day. Bye for now. Catch you on the flip side.